everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sarah,
And I'm Nania.
and this is Horror Slash
Dash
Stories.
stories.
Welcome to season 2 of the podcast. I can't believe it's season 2, where we are going to be focusing on folk horror.
Yay, folk horror, my favorite.
Yeah. So, this episode, we're kind of going to explore, like what is folk horror? How do we perceive folk horror? And kind of what we hope to do or learn or examine this season. But before we dive into the horrors, how are you?
I'm
I
okay.
guess maybe that is diving into the horrors.
Surviving the horrors by reading the horrors. What about
Yeah,
you?
I definitely relate to that because I definitely feel like it's been a really hard time. And by engaging in media that is more stressful than my life, I feel a little bit better. I'm like, okay, I can handle this email that I have to answer.
Yeah. It's like, oh, my job is stressful, but like at least I'm not getting like sacrificed to the eldritch god like after work.
Yeah, yeah. What are you reading or watching these days, folk horror or otherwise?
Well, I actually made a folk horror collection on my Kindle because I felt like I should do that since we're diving into folk horror this season. So, relevant talking points. Right now, I'm reading Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng, which is a Chinese authored book about a Chinese heroine. And from what I understand, it has like Chinese mythology in it about like the
Oh, cool.
undead and ghosts. She's also like I don't know what you call those people, the people who clean up after deaths. So
Oh, sure.
yeah, she's like a forensic cleanup person, and it's really
That's
dark
really cool.
but really good.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. That one has been one I've been wanting to read, and I didn't know it was folk horror, so that sounds really cool.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham
Yay.
Jones. Like, not like that they're like similar stories, but just like the way that it's like kind of a murder mystery, but it has like the folklore infused into the murder mystery. I feel like it's a lot like that.
Did you finish My Heart is a Chainsaw? And bear in mind, if you're going to say something mean, it's my favorite.
Oh, no. I really like it. It reminds me of Stephen King, but like I hope he doesn't hear this, but better. Like, I feel like his characterization is just really good. I love the heroine. I love, like, all of the meta horror references, but it's really heavy. Like, the abuse themes are a lot, so I haven't been reading it very fast, but I really like it.
Yay. I love hearing everything that you're reading, and I love that you have a whole folk horror list because you always have the best recommendations, and
Oh.
you do the reading, so we don't have to. Well, then we read the good books that you tell us to read.
Oh my goodness, that's so much pressure and responsibility.
Are you reading or watching anything else these days? Or
I can give you my to-read list.
yes,
Okay, so I just bought she's a friend of mine, and I finally bought it, The Bone Drenched Woods by L.V. Russell. It's like
ooh,
girls who are like married off to like appease like an ancient forest god or whatever. It sounded totally up my alley.
that
And then
sounds awesome.
yes. And then I have 4 black folk horror books. It Waits in the Forest by Sarah Doss, The Forest Demands Its Due by Kosoko Jackson, Daughter of the Merciful Deep by Leslye Penelope, and Tangleroot by Kalela Williams.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Wow, the forest is demanding.
yeah, the forest like wants a lot, but you have to listen to the forest or bad things happen.
Clearly. Well, I can't wait to hear what you think of all those books.
Yeah, I've already started It Waits in the Forest and Tangleroot, and I can tell they're both probably gonna be 5-star reads. They're just really, really good.
Ooh, that's awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. I've just started I'm not reading very much. I've been kind of in a slump. I'm just started La Reina by JD Yanez, which
Oh,
have you heard of that one?
I have.
Okay, yeah. I'm liking it so far. I'm only a few chapters into it, but I almost am wondering if it's going a folk horror direction. It's definitely like a horror suspense direction dealing with intergenerational trauma, and it's kind of set in the Chicano culture of the 90s. and
Oh,
it's really cool. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's very spooky and, like, mysterious of what I've read of the first few chapters, but it also seems like it might be a heavy topics, but, I'm intrigued, I'm hooked. I also I was reading a lot of really heavy nonfiction, and I realized that it was just I feel like the heaviness of what we're experiencing in the world right now has been really overwhelming, and it's like there's so much happening and there's so much information all at once, like that it's hard to cope with that just like physically and mentally. And so I think I need to just take a mental break and just intersperse that with something a little bit less rooted in reality. So I restarted listening to the audiobook for Gideon the Ninth, which have you read Gideon the Ninth?
I think I started it and then I ended up putting it down and forgetting where I put it, so it's, like, in book limbo right now, but I remember liking what I read.
It's one of my favorites, and I've never finished the series, so I'm really happy to get back into that. And listening to that book actually put me in a good mental space where I'm just like, okay, I'm ready to pick up. I'm ready to deal with reality. I'm feeling reinvigorated. I'm ready to, do what I need to do in this world we're in.
Right. Compassion fatigue is a real thing. I think you just have to, like, do whatever you can to feel like you're helping and then, like, not burn out.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's
But
true.
honestly, I think, like, one of the best things that you can do, which you do, is consume, marginalized media
Yeah.
because it is, like, bold and controversial and difficult to consume.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think especially in this time where I mean, if we're gonna get into the really heavy details right at the beginning of season 2, just like, what's going on we see with our library systems right now and with the legislature that is being introduced having to deal with books, it's more important than ever to, I think, speak up and to, like, call your representatives and contact your representatives even if it feels like it's not making a difference, there are things you can do.
Yes. And go to your town hall meetings. If you find out that you have books that are in the school system or in the library that are up for the chopping block, especially if they're by queer authors or authors of color, defend those books and make it clear that you're going to know that their presence will be missed if they're taken away.
So folklore.
Folk horror, what is it?
What is it? That's the that's the question of the hour. What do you think of when you hear the terms folk horror? Like, what associations does it have for you?
For me, I feel like folk horror is adjacent to kind of urban legend, except it's more steeped in like tradition and folklore and mythology. So I feel like whenever I hear folk horror, I always picture like traditions, sometimes pagan, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's just something that happens to have been passed down through a community. I think a good example of a more recent version of folk horror is Harley LaRue's Souls
Oh, I've
trilogy,
never read it.
because even though it's contemporary, it's like about like a god, an evil god that lives beneath this town and demands the blood of its founders to basically keep everyone else in the town safe.
Oh, cool. I would totally read that.
Yeah, and like each of the heroines in the book is one of the people that was supposed to have been marked for sacrifice or is somewhat tangential to the sacrifice, and they end up summoning demons to basically protect them and wreak havoc on the town in revenge.
Spooky. I love it. That sounds like
Yeah, they're also
fun.
super smutty, which helps.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right about that tradition aspect. I actually, yesterday, just on Tubi, I randomly started watching this documentary that was like, what is folk horror? It was the history of folk horror. And of course, I do not remember it
Oh,
now. It was a 3 hour documentary. I did not watch the whole thing, but it was really interesting. And it was talking, I definitely recommend it. I will make a note of what it is if other people want to check it out. But yeah, apparently Tubi has a lot of folk horror on it.
Link in the
Link in
description.
the description. Like, they have the blood on Satan's claw, which I know is one of,
Oh,
like, the unholy trinity they call of folk horror. Have you heard about that?
okay. No, I don't this is embarrassing considering,
No.
like, what this podcast is called, but, like, I don't watch a lot of horror because it's, like, really scary. So, I rely on you and other people to tell me, like, how scary something is before I watch it.
I haven't seen it. Apparently, there are these 3 movies that are considered, like, the unholy trinity of folk horror, and they
Love
were
that.
from, like, the '70s, I think, or, like, late '60s, which are The Witchfinder General, Blood on Satan's Claw, and The Wicker Man, which I think you could totally handle The Wicker Man if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah. I feel like I've probably seen clips of it because I know my parents watched it.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because, like, you mentioned the '70s, and I think the '70s was also when there was kind of like a resurgence of satanic gothic horror,
Mhm.
where, like, there was a lot of gothic '70s horror novels that were about, like, paganism, but, like, turned evil and, like, sacrifices to the devil. I think it kind of preceded the Satanic Panic, and they're pretty rare now. I think I own, like, 2 or
Oh,
3
cool.
of
I
them.
love that.
Yeah, they appreciate in value, so if you ever find one in a thrift store, grab them, but, like, yeah, it's interesting how cyclical trends are because I feel like we're seeing, like, another resurgence of that now,
Yeah.
where people are like, "Give us all the folk and gothic horror."
It's so interesting, and I think in the documentary, they were talking about how the Witchfinder General was set during a war and how that like, they drew intentional parallels between what was happening in that film and what was happening in Vietnam at the time, and so, I think there's always a
Oh,
little bit of a
interesting.
commentary in horror movies, I think, on yeah, the environment of the times or, like, the mood at the time, so I think there's always something to look for.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that it's popular now is because so many of them have this theme of tradition or religion gone wrong.
Mhm,
And I feel like that's something that people really resonate with, especially, like, if it incorporates themes of, like, misogyny or, like, racism, overcoming racism, like, that's, like, a theme in those 2 books I mentioned
mhm,
earlier. And so I think it's, like, a really great way, kind of like how you mentioned earlier, where if you write something that has themes that are painful but really relevant to you, but they're also worse than what you're going through right now, it can be really cathartic to kind of write a book out with those themes and then give it the ending that you want for the real world,
mhm.
where justice is, like, served.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
Horror is great for anxiety because I think, like, anxiety is something that's difficult to define unless you've experienced it, but most people understand fear and dread, and so I think when you're reading a horror novel, you can kind of use those as an example of, like, "No, I feel like this, like, all the time, and so this is, like, cathartic for me to read because this makes me feel seen, except, like, I don't need, like, a tangible horror to feel horrified with my
Mhm.
anxiety."
You said it so well. Yes, 100%, I agree with that.
Well, I had practice because I mentioned this on my interview with you and your brother earlier,
Okay.
where I was talking about how I got into horror.
Well, recall. So what would you say defines folk horror? We kinda touched on this a little bit already, but is there anything you wanted to add?
I think the emphasis on tradition,
Mhm.
I think, I think there's a lot of groupthink. Like, I think, like, one of the things that makes folk horror so chilling is the complicitness of the group to do these often very cruel and bloody things in the name of a greater good that isn't actually that good.
Yeah.
And I think that the protagonist in these books is usually being gaslit. And so it's the horror isn't just the horrors being committed, it's also the horror of not being believed or being the sole like voice of sanity and this group of delusional people who are very convinced that they're in the right and they have the moral high ground.
Mhm, totally. Yeah.
What about you? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I feel like folk horror usually deals with a lot of dichotomies, usually, like yeah, tradition and also maybe technology or maybe, like, modern life, and,
Mm.
you also are dealing with, like, sometimes, I think often rural versus urban, or maybe not versus, but usually you'll have an outsider who is coming to an insular community,
Yeah.
and the outsider, has, like, modern are, like, comfortable with modern life, with urban life, and then they're coming to this rural community a lot of the time where it's just a very different there are a lot of like counterposing. What am I trying to say? There are a lot of dichotomies. I'm trying to think of another word for dichotomies, but that's okay. um and I think a lot of the times folklore is very visual in just like beautiful visuals of nature and rural scenery, and yeah, usually has elements of, like you were saying, traditions, but oftentimes it will be like, it'll be traditions that have stood the test of time, or even like especially non-Christian traditions that
Mm.
it's really interesting to see how different film creators, the message they are trying to create or convey with their films.
Sometimes the folk horror, like, people are in the right? Like, you get the message where, like, this is wrong, and then also sometimes, well, maybe some people, like, deserve to have bad things happen to them for
Yeah.
violating the rules.
Yeah, and it's some of my favorite folk horror movies that I'm thinking about were ones that I've just seen in the past year, like Incantation, which was like, yeah,
Mm.
they go into this insular community to witness this ancient tradition that is special to this family and is pretty gruesome, actually. And then they literally trespass, and also like, they break something sacred, that they intentionally break something sacred, and
Oh,
then they're cursed. But also one that was really fascinating was The Wailing, which originally I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch it for folk horror season because I've already seen it. And I don't know what I have to say. But now the more I think about it, I think it could be one that's interesting for us to watch and discuss. It is pretty scary, but it also, I think it's probably manageable. You can decide, but it's really interesting because it deals with relationships between, like, the Japanese people and Korean people, because there's a tense history, and
right.
just how people perceive outsiders and how people perceive the other, and the entire movie kind of questions what is true, and it's really fascinating.
That sounds interesting.
And even after watching it, I don't know what, like, the ending and the message is ambiguous, except it really makes you think.
I love movies like that. Like, movies that don't hold your hand, they just kind of try to present the truth as it is and let, like, the viewer decide. I think that's, like, the best kind of storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. I think you do that in your storytelling, by the way.
Aw, thank you. That's, like, goals. I don't know if that's true, but thank you.
Um, do you find folk horror scary?
I do and I don't. So, I have this well, I had this shelf called The Langoliers Effect. I don't know if you've ever seen The Langoliers
Mm-mm.
by Stephen King. Okay, so it's like a cult classic, and it's really good. The buildup is amazing, but then the reveal is silly. Like, bad CGI silly, like, I'll let you imagine
Mhm.
without spoiling it because you should watch it,
I would
it's
love to.
worth it. And so I have this thing that I call the Langoliers effect, where sometimes a good story can be spoiled by a bad reveal.
Mhm.
And I think what's really crucial with folk horror is that you have to be really careful with the reveal, because if you go too camp or too over the top, I feel like it just becomes ridiculous.
Mhm.
Because I feel like in our society, we tend to mock tradition and superstition because, like you were saying, there is a dichotomy between like the old and the new. And so, to kind of like make ourselves feel better about the modern times, sometimes we denigrate the old.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of pressure on authors to create, or filmmakers to create, these believable rituals that make sense, that don't feel like pageantry.
Mhm.
Although I would argue that sometimes pageantry is the point. Like on our last episode, Midsummer,
Mhm.
I thought they did a really good
It'll
job
be our
with
next
being
episode. 'Cause this one
Yes.
will come out
They were
first.
they were so over the top, but also so horrifying, and it felt so inevitable, and I felt like that was really chilling,
Yeah,
just, like, how matter of fact the violence was.
I agree, and I think Midsummer and The Witch, which we're also going to be talking about, kind of brought about a little bit of a folk horror revival.
Yeah.
Do I find folk horror scary?
Do you?
Do I? Not specifically, like, not necessarily. It's not necessarily a genre that I'm like, "Oh my gosh, folk horror, that creeps me out." I think it's how the film is executed. Like, what I find scary is ghosts. I love a ghost story, but those are usually what scare me.
There can be ghosts in folk horror.
That's true, so maybe we'll have to watch some folk horror with ghosts. I did find The Wailing pretty like, we were just talking about that, I did find The Wailing pretty scary, so I'm looking forward to being spooked. But do I find folk horror in general scary? I find it more intriguing than I do scary, I
You're so much braver than I am. I'm just, like, scared of everything.
think. Anyway, do you have any I know you read a lot of folk horror, and I think it seems like it's one of your it's a genre you like.
It is.
Do you have any favorite books or films?
God, every time someone asks me what my favorite books are, like, my brain immediately forgets, like, not only every title I've ever heard, but also, like, how to read. Like, "Oh, me? I don't read books? What are those?"
You're like, "Mrs. De Winter
Um,
is dead."
okay, so, one of my faves is by my friend, Kate Rivenhall, The Eclipse Ritual. I feel like that's really good campy folk horror that also manages to be very serious and terrifying and have real stakes. Although, trigger warning, it does have, like, non-con and incest, so don't read it if those would be upsetting to you because there's a lot of that, but I normally don't like either of those things, and I really like this book. Another one of my favorites, which also has the same themes, which is kind of upsetting and potentially questionable, but Bloodroots by Richie Tankersley Cusick, who writes YA. And this is like kind of funny, like, and somewhat tangential, but like all of her YA and her two adult titles recently got rebranded and new
Oh,
covers
interesting.
for Kindle, and they all look the same.
Huh.
And so every time I recommend people Bloodroots and her other adult titles, Scarecrow, which are both folk horror, I'm like, these are not YA. Do not give these to your
Oh my
children
gosh.
because they have like non-con and like violence and like incest and murder and all this other stuff. And like, I don't know what they were thinking, but they made them look exactly the same as her like YA titles.
Probably, like, people who didn't read the books, they're probably just like, "Same author."
Yeah, yeah. It was like, I guess, a little bit of a deviation for her because she's one of my favorite YA novels. She was kind of like a contemporary with R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike. And then she did her two adult novels. And actually, R.L. Stine has an adult novel too
Oh,
called
cool.
Superstition, which I think also has some folk horror in it as well.
That's awesome.
I, I
Yeah,
haven't read that
I'm
one.
really interested and excited for us to, like, approach different books and just ask, like, "Is it folk horror?"
Yeah.
Because I think that could be fun.
And I think sometimes they have like elements of it, but like they wouldn't necessarily be categorically folk horror.
Mhm. Yeah. I think classification is always so super interesting.
Another
Yes,
recommendation,
please.
which actually is YA, which makes it very accessible for people who are a little more hesitant about violence and other stuff, is What We Harvest by Anne Freistadt. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I think I am. And it's really good. It's kind of got Stardew Valley vibes in the beginning. Like
Mm.
it's this like ideal town that has like these magical crops, like sparkly melons and like golden produce and stuff, and so like people come for miles to get these like magical, but then like something starts to go wrong and like the produce starts to be rotten and like the animals in the woods start to change and have like these creepy eyes that turn silver in the dark, and so you can just see all these eyes watching you from the
Oh,
woods,
interesting.
and the town starts to turn on each other, as they like get more and more desperate and paranoid. And also another one that's really good is Small Favors by Aaron Craig, which is a loose Rumpelstiltskin retelling about people making bargains with creatures in the woods, but the bargains always backfire. And there's
Oh,
also a supernatural element. Yeah.
that sounds really good. I would love to check that out.
Both of those were 5-star reads for me, and they're incredible and also very underrated, and I will go to bat for
Well,
them.
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to link those so we can all
What
check
about
them out.
you? What would you rec?
I'm having one of those moments like you were just talking about where I thought about before we recorded what I was going to say, what my recommendations were, and now I'm like, have I ever seen a movie?"
Oh,
I love The Blair Witch Project. I think it's a classic.
I've never seen
Oh
it.
my gosh, do you want to? It's
Sure.
not the scariest thing in the world, but I think it's really well done, and I think the tension is so well established, and I love a low budget film, which I think it was low budget. I found it, like, very for the most part, very believable, and it kinda was because they were kinda, like, tricking the actors, or the actors didn't know what was going on, so, yeah, there's definitely I definitely found it believable, and then I was talking about I'm gonna say it for the 3rd time, The Wailing. I really liked that movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing more films by the person oh my gosh, I can't remember who created that film. I'm not gonna put that in. I'm like, I really like The Wailing.
They were a human, and they made a
They
movie,
were
and you liked
human,
it.
and they made a movie, and I liked it. What other things?
I have another one.
Please, oh my gosh.
Gothic Town, by Emily Carpenter, and mandatory disclaimer, I did get this book as an advanced reader copy, so do with that what you will,
Mhm,
but I really, really liked it. It actually kinda goes back to one of the themes you were talking about earlier where, sometimes people from, like, the urban corporate life are lured to these small towns. And so she sees like an offer for like a house online. I think it's like $100.
mhm.
And like in this economy, like hell yeah, like I would want a house for like $100. And so she moves her husband and her daughter to this town, I think in Georgia,
Mm.
that's like super picturesque and beautiful, but, like, there's been all this super sus stuff that happened there that she finds out about, like, after she's already, like, trapped there, and then there might be, like, paranormal stuff, her husband starts having dreams, their, like, pet starts acting strange, and her daughter starts having, like, these weird visions,
Oh,
and
interesting. These
it's
are
so creepy.
amazing recommendations.
Aw, thank you. I hope people like them. I would also recommend another book, She Is a Haunting by Trang Tan Tran, which is Vietnamese folk
Oh,
horror.
cool.
It sounds kinda like The Grudge, but, like, with Vietnamese
Oh,
mythology.
that sounds really scary. I kinda wanna I'm,
Yeah.
like, scared, intrigued, where I'm just like, "Oh, that sounds like it would really scare me and disturb me, and I would not be okay. I want to read it."
What about you? Do you have more
I don't
recs?
think I can't think of any more recs. I probably as soon as we move on, I probably will.
I'm just, like, vomiting recs, and
I'm
you're just, like,
so glad you are,
captive
though.
audience.
I love them, and they all sound really cool, so, I am very appreciative of your wealth of knowledge, but I can talk about, like, movies I'm maybe looking forward to and books I'm looking forward to checking out.
Please do.
Okay, yeah, so I put together a list that I posted on Instagram. So I probably won't go through the whole list right now, but Exuma sounds really cool. That's a movie from 2024 and it is
Oh.
South Korean and it follows an excavation of a grave and what I have written is that it unleashes dreadful consequences buried underneath. So that sounds exciting and interesting. And like you've got that traditional element. And apparently it delves a lot into Korean folklore. So that
Ooh.
sounds really cool. The medium also is set in Thailand's Isan region and I don't know much, but it's kind of about possession, and I think that this film was made by the same people who made The Wailing, so it looks really fun and creepy, and then you were talking about I think when we were thinking about, like, okay, what are some of our favorites? La Llorona, which seems I would definitely be interested to check that out.
I haven't seen La Llorona, but I know the story
Mhm.
of it from, like, Latinx folklore, and I find it fascinating because it's like the epitome of like feminine rage.
Yeah.
So that's something I definitely want to watch.
Yeah, and the description sounds really interesting. I'm just gonna read it, like, what the official description is because I think they said it better than I could, but they say, "Alma is murdered with her children during a military attack in Guatemala, but 30 years later, when the general who ordered the genocide is found not guilty, Alma comes back to the world of the living to torment the man."
Good for her.
Yeah. I really enjoy watching horror movies from around the world. I think it's just interesting to see how, like, different people portrayed fears.
Yeah. I know we talked about this on one of the other podcast episodes, but like the difference between like American horror, for example, which I feel like tends to, on average, unless it's like an art house horror movie, rely on like jump scares. Whereas I feel like a lot of, for example, Japanese horror, which I find terrifying,
Mhm.
is very reliant on ambience and like the environment and like the interplay between like how your mind can be manipulated to question your whole reality based on like what's going on around you. I feel like a lot of the Japanese horror movies I've seen are really good at that,
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
terrifying.
Totally, and I really am fascinated by the exploration of culture and history in different films, like, when Maddie and I watched the movie When Evil Lurks, it was a commentary on pesticides and how, like,
Mm.
using pesticides is affecting rural communities. I think Argentina, I'm struggling to remember where that film is from now. But yeah, and same with I'm gonna say it for the 4th time, The Wailing with,
Oh, I just looked it up, you're right, it is Argentina.
okay, okay, good.
Yeah,
The Wailing with, the history between Japan and Korea.
mhm,
I really am interested in learning about, and I think with folk horror, history is very relevant, and so I love analyzing those elements of horror movies.
me too. And I think it's important also to take into context the cultural contexts when you're looking at folk horror.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. Yeah, but there's a lot of good movies that we'll be watching, and there are a lot of books that look really good too that I cannot remember. Oh my gosh, I should have prepared. This is like the season intro, and I shouldn't have winged it. I'm really looking forward to
Let me pull up my
yeah,
Goodreads. Oh, here we go. Oh, wow, like, my to-read list is, like, all folk horror.
awesome.
So I have This Cursed House by Del Sandine, which I believe is by a Black author and is about a Black character navigating like this scenario where she enters a house situation and like everything is wrong. My favorite trope, cannot wait for that. And then I have I'll Be Waiting by Kelly Armstrong. Kelly Armstrong is an underrated folk horror
Oh,
icon. She
cool.
actually wrote one of my favorite books I just remembered that I forgot about, which is a ringing endorsement. I'm so sorry, Kelly, if you ever hear this. But like it's called Hemlock Island and it's about this like woman who had a messy divorce and she gets the house and the divorce. But then her husband decides to come back and bring his friends and like interrupt her peace. And then immediately things on the island start going wrong and like animals are showing up murdered in like these really weird ways. And then people start showing up murdered in really weird ways. So this new book, I'll Be Waiting, is about like spiritualism gone wrong and like psychics, and it looks really good. And then another to read list book, which is not out yet, and I'm hoping to get an arc, and I probably won't, but that's okay because I'm going to buy it anyway. Is Black Wicket by B. Northwick, who wrote one of my favorite gothic romances of all time, which is called The Cruel Dark, and it has a companion book called Lover, which I love. And this is about like a gothic house which is super creepy. And then this woman goes there after her sister dies. And oh no, they practice black magic. So shit goes down.
I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to reading all of the books you are recommending. And I did think of another movie that I can recommend that I don't know if I would consider it folk horror, but it's folk horror adjacent. It's called His House from 2020. and it's a movie about a couple that are leaving that they leave South Sudan as refugees, and they're trying to make a new life in England, but it really, they move into a house and the house is haunted. But on top of the
Of course.
supernatural element, they're having to deal with these very real problems that refugees and immigrants are facing, that are as scary as this very scary haunting. And I love when films combine real life tensions and supernatural, and I think that's a really interesting way to explore fear and also call attention to important topics.
Now that you mention it, I agree. I think that's like one of my favorite understated tropes. I think the first movie I ever saw that did that was Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro, where it had like Spain during its like fascist revolutionary period, and then you have that juxtaposed against this dark fantasy horror. And it's like she's escaping from her present situation by going into this fantasy land, but it's being poisoned by like her fear and terror of like the horrors that she experiences on an everyday life.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Hmm.
Which I would also say isn't really folk horror, but it's like folk horror adjacent.
This is my favorite thing to ask is just like, yeah, is it folk horror? Is it folk horror adjacent? Like, what, I love that question about horror in general of just like, is it horror? What makes it horror? I'm really excited to talk about that and explore that. But yeah, I don't really have a list of books that I'm planning to read because I'm a mood reader. I'm gonna, as the book falls into my lap, I'll probably read it. But yeah,
Yeah. Lots to read and
that's
watch,
so true.
especially if you watch the rest of our season where we go into this in more depth
Yeah.
instead of just yapping about our faves. So, what would you say some of your favorite like folk horror tropes are? Because it sounds like you've
Okay.
watched a decent amount or read a decent amount. Well, what draws you in and would be like an auto buy or an auto watch?
I love social commentary in a horror movie. That's one of my favorite tropes. But I've got the spinning wheel happening for me right
The Windows error.
Um, I like when people take overused tropes and do something new with it. So I'm all for, you know, that reinvention of the Wicker Man. Or it doesn't even have to be specifically that, but we were talking a little bit, or we're going to be talking a little bit about with Midsommar, how that movie really has a lot of parallels with the Wicker Man, but it's also done something completely different with it. And I think that's really fascinating. I love the reinvention or innovation of a popular trope.
I love
Mhm.
that.
What about you?
Okay, so yours is like super intellectual. I'm just like, I like sacrifices, I like plant horror, I like doomed romance, I like cults. At the risk of being a little self-promotional, like, that's why I wrote, like, Raise the Blood. I
Mhm.
put, like, a lot of my favorite folk horror tropes in it because I just love, like, forest horror and, like, creepy family secrets and, like, fucked up rituals that have, like, overarching, like,
Mhm.
social commentary. I just I love sensationalized drama and people doing fucked up shit, but, like, in a poetic and fun way that's entertaining for me personally.
Totally, and you bringing up Raise the Blood makes me think about how in that documentary I was watching, they were talking about how folk horror kind of developed from Gothic, like the
Yeah,
Gothic
I could
genre,
see that.
and I think that is gonna be really cool to explore also, like, how they're connected. Because when we talked to Kate Raven, she was talking about how her favorite horror movies are Gothic or folk horror, and I do think there's a lot drawing the 2 genres together, or a lot of parallels also.
Are we doing a Gothic segment? Because if we're not, we should.
We should do that next. That can be
Yes,
season
let's do
3.
Gothic next. Yay!
And I'm also really looking forward to checking out the book Waking the Moon because that's, like, our friend Dana Sweeney loves that book, and I'm excited to check it out.
Oh, yeah, I think that one's on my to-read list.
We can read it.
Everything's on my to-read list.
But you actually read the books that are on your to-read list.
Sort of. Slowly. I mean, okay, so, like, moment of truth, I have, like, almost 4,000 books on my Kindle, and so when I say I'm going to read something, like, it could be, like, tomorrow or it could be, like, 500 years from now posthumously,
Yeah.
like
Oh my gosh. Totally. I have to accept about myself, I should never request an arc because I won't read it. I do have an arc that I mean, it's oh man, this book was already published, so I feel bad that I haven't read it yet, but it's also by Stephen Graham Jones, and it is, The Buffalo Hunter Hunter, and it's about vampires, and I think it also might be
Oh, that
folk
sounds good.
horror.
He
So
has a new he has a new book coming out. I just saw a Goodreads giveaway for it
oh,
pop up. I think it
cool.
ends tonight. So you should apply because, like, the cutoff is at midnight and you could win.
I will have to check it out. Yeah, he's one of my favorite authors, and I've seen his books categorized a lot of the time as folk horror. It's hard for me to say whether they actually are folk horror, but that's one of those things that I think is cool and fun to explore.
Well, he incorporates a lot of the native tradition
That's true.
into his stories.
Mhm.
And actually, while reading that anthology, I think I talk about in one of our other episodes, Never Whistle at Night. It's an anthology of native horror authors writing about their folklore and like their identities into this collective work of short stories. And I feel like it straddles several different genres because there were some
Mhm.
stories in it that I personally wouldn't really consider folk horror, but like they all fit. Like they all kind of had like this cohesive feel to them where I was kind of like, oh, okay, I can see like even if it's not like what I would personally call folk horror,
Mhm.
like I could see it'd be like folk horror adjacent.
Yeah. I have a feeling we're gonna be using the words folk horror adjacent a lot.
Hashtag trademark symbol. No.
Yeah, horror and horror adjacent things are so fascinating to me because there are so many times where people question whether something is horror or is not horror. And just going back again to Ari Aster when he's talking about Midsummer and he's talking about how for him it's not a horror movie. He was saying that's not me trying to put down the horror genre because he made so much, like he got his fame really from Hereditary, which is
Right.
considered folk horror, and I will never watch that movie again.
Oh,
You should read the description. You should read the Wikipedia summary.
okay.
Um,
I'm scared.
I read the Wikipedia summary before I saw it, and it still traumatized me. But he says that Midsummer is not a horror movie, but he said, Hereditary is a horror movie. So I think it's interesting again, like where Midsummer is horror adjacent, but I think a lot of people consider it horror. And I love the question of, I don't know, I just love this is the type of exploration I love.
Yeah, I think there's a hesitancy, like, to be crammed in a box if
Hmm.
you're, like, a creative type because I feel like I mean, speaking as an author, I feel like there's this kinda tug of war between wanting to be marketable and also wanting to tell, like, an original story, and so I think there's, like, a temptation, like, to not want to just limit yourself to one genre
Hmm.
because you feel like you're bound to all of the conventions of that genre, whereas, like, if you are a little bit more, like, widespread, you can do more and be a little more unconventional.
Hmm.
But I think sometimes when people do that, they're also wrong.
Yeah.
Because sometimes like, people be like, "I'm not a romance," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, like, your main premise is 2 people falling in love and it has an HEA, like, you're a
Yeah.
romance,
Yeah.
and I'm going to tell everyone that you're a romance and not listen to you."
Mhm, mhm.
Respectfully.
Yeah, yeah. I get really excited about that.
Me too.
I think we're gonna have a lot of fun.
I think so too. And if you like my book recommendations, God help you, you should follow me on Threads because I just regurgitate book recommendations all day. And you can ask me for any book recommendation, I can probably find it for
She
you.
can. Yeah.
No matter how esoteric, you could be like, I want like a band of like singing space goblins, and I will find that book for you and tell you what it
Well,
is.
you even do a trope Tuesday where people can ask you like, "Hey, I'm looking for a book with these tropes," and you're like, "I got you."
It's true. I've had it running for 2 years and no one stumped me yet. Someone came in with, like, a joke request, but I still managed to find a book that fit what they were looking for, and they were so embarrassed that they didn't respond.
So I'm gonna, like next Tuesday, ask about singing space goblins.
And I'm gonna spend all weekend researching that so I can come up with, like, 5 just to spite you.
Oh my gosh, I don't actually want you to have to do that, but I'm sure that you could.
I probably could.
This has been fantastic.
Where can people find you if they want more Sarah?
I don't know why you would, but if you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Sarah with 2 H's, so SARAHH Beth BETH underscore reads. That's me on Instagram. I don't post very often anymore, but I do post on the horror slash stories underscore pod Instagram, and maybe I'll even start going on our Threads account a little bit.
Yay.
We'll see how that goes. But yeah, where can people find you?
They can find me at Threads and Instagram at Always Be Booked, B with 2 E's as in Bumblebee, and I'm Nenia Campbell everywhere else.
Yeah.
And I have, like, a different personality on every website that I use, so be forewarned, like, you never know which me you're gonna get, like, depending on where you're following me, so caveat emptor.
Yeah. We love having those extra letters in our usernames.
I put mine because I love so someone thought it was, like, always be ebooked, and that had never occurred to me until, like, they said it, because for me, it was like, I like bumblebees a lot, and I've never been stung. Like, there's so many bees in my garden, but I talk to the bees, like, they're my friends, which is kinda sad, but
I think it's cute.
I'm just like, "Hey, how are you?"
Oh,
Like, "Hi, bee," and, like yeah, so I've never been stung, and I love bees, and I'm always reading,
you
and I
do
always
always
have
be
books.
ebooked.
Yeah.
You have what,
I do always be
4,000
books.
did you say 4,000 books on your Kindle?
I think it is, like, 4,000 at this time, and I have, like, another 2,000 in physical copies, so I literally have more books than I will probably read in my lifetime.
Mine was just an extra H because everyone is named Sarah Elizabeth.
I thought it was, like, double the H, double the fun.
It is.
Okay.
It is now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That's your brand.
Yeah, that's my new brand. Yeah. Where depression is over. Now we have fun.
Yay. Thank goodness for H.
Thank goodness for H.
Wait. Oh, no, that sounds like we're endorsing heroin. Okay. FBI handlers, please don't disregard.
Well, thank you for listening to Horror Slash
Yeah.
Stories. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you gave us a review or shared this episode with a friend. You can find us on social media. You can email us. If you want to be a guest on the show, we would love to talk to you, especially if you are excited about folk horror. Fill out a form through the link in our Instagram bio. And once again, our Instagram is at horror slash stories underscore pod. That's also Threads. And if you want to email us, we're horror slash stories pod at gmail.com. No underscore in the email.
And don't forget to subscribe to the show and to follow us on social media, me double E, Sarah double H. And we love you so much for listening.
Yo,
Bye.
bye.